What if I told you that a mother's worst nightmare, being disrespected by her own son, was turned around in the most unexpected way? Before we continue, let us know where are you watching this from, and what time is it for you? So, it was a quiet afternoon at a local café when Sarah, a kind-hearted elderly woman, sat down to enjoy a cup of coffee. Her frail hands carefully stirred the warm beverage, lost in thought. The café, usually a peaceful haven, was bustling with activity, but Sarah didn't mind the noise. Her mind was elsewhere. She had come to meet her son, Tom, who had promised to spend some time with her after his hectic week at work. As Sarah waited patiently, her thoughts wandered back to the days when Tom was a young boy, full of life and laughter. Those days seemed so distant now. Tom had grown up to be a successful businessman, but over the years, their relationship had strained. The long hours at work, his increasing detachment, and the busy pace of life had taken its toll. Finally, Tom walked in. He was dressed in his usual sharp suit, looking every bit the part of a corporate professional. Sarah stood up to greet him, her face lighting up with joy. But as she reached out for a hug, something strange happened. Tom quickly stepped back, his expression unreadable. "Mom, we need to talk," Tom said, his voice colder than Sarah had expected. She sat back down, unsure of what was coming. Before she could ask what was on his mind, Tom launched into a tirade. His voice grew louder, and his words were sharp, filled with bitterness. "You never understand anything. You're always so demanding. I'm so tired of this. You need to stop acting like I owe you everything," Tom snapped. Sarah's heart sank. She had never seen her son so angry, so filled with resentment. It felt like a stab to her chest. The years of care, the sacrifices, the love, all seemed to mean nothing in that moment. She tried to speak, to defend herself, but Tom's words cut her off. "You've become a burden, Mom. I can't keep up with you anymore," he added, his voice dripping with frustration. Sarah's eyes welled up with tears. She had never imagined that her son would speak to her like this. She had always hoped that, no matter how difficult things got, they would still have each other. But the harsh words left her reeling, unsure of how to respond. Just as Sarah wiped away a tear, a deep voice interrupted the tension-filled air. It was a man who had been sitting quietly at a nearby table, a distinguished black veteran, dressed in a simple yet well-fitted suit. His presence seemed commanding, yet his demeanor was calm. He had witnessed the entire exchange between mother and son. "Excuse me, young man," the veteran said, his voice steady, yet filled with authority. Tom turned to face him, his annoyance evident. "What do you want?" Tom asked, his voice still laced with anger. The veteran stood up, his posture straight and his gaze unwavering. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation," he said, making eye contact with Tom. "I've lived a long life, seen many things, and fought for this country. And let me tell you, the way you're speaking to your mother, it's not just disrespectful, it's wrong." Tom looked stunned. The veteran's words were like a slap in the face, but they weren't angry. They were filled with wisdom and experience. "Your mother has given you everything she has, every bit of love, every ounce of care. And you repay her with this bitterness? You should be grateful for her, for the years she has spent raising you, supporting you, even when you didn't know it. She's earned your respect." Tom opened his mouth to say something, but the veteran raised a hand, silencing him. "No, let me finish," the veteran continued. "I'm not asking you to love her perfectly. I'm not asking you to agree with everything she says. But I'm asking you to remember what she has given you, and don't you ever forget it." The entire café had gone quiet, with customers watching the exchange unfold. Sarah sat frozen, her eyes wide, unsure of what to make of the situation. The veteran's words had hit her son like a ton of bricks. Tom's face slowly began to change. His anger faded, replaced by a deep, almost embarrassed realization. The veteran's words had a way of reaching him that nothing else had, in years. "I'm sorry, Mom," Tom finally muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The veteran, nodding in approval, returned to his seat. The entire atmosphere of the cafe shifted. The tension that had hung in the air just moments before had dissipated, replaced by an unspoken understanding. Sarah couldn't believe what had just happened. Her son, who had been so cruel just moments ago, was now apologizing, something she never thought she'd hear. And it was all because of the unexpected intervention of a stranger who, without hesitation, stepped in to teach a valuable lesson about respect and love. As the veteran sat back down, the weight of his words hung in the air like a dense fog. Sarah was still in shock, barely processing what had just unfolded. The entire cafe seemed to exhale a collective breath, the tension evaporating as if it had never existed. Tom, though, seemed different. The words of the stranger had struck a chord, and he sat in silence, his face a mixture of guilt and reflection. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The once chilly air between mother and son had warmed, but the silence was thick, almost unbearable. Tom's fingers drummed nervously on the table as he tried to collect his thoughts. His pride had taken a blow, but somewhere deep down he knew the veteran had been right. He had been wrong in his treatment of Sarah, and the realization was far more painful than he had expected. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "Tom, I didn't ask for much from you. Just time and love. I know you're busy. I understand that. But I'm your mother, and all I ever wanted was for you to see me as more than just a name on a calendar." Tom turned toward her, the weight of her words sinking in. He had been so consumed by his own life, by his career, and his personal struggles, that he had failed to see what truly mattered. Sarah wasn't just his mother. She was the person who had loved him unconditionally through every mistake, every bad decision, and every tough phase of his life. And in his blind ambition, he had forgotten to show her the respect and gratitude she deserved. I don't know what to say, Mom," Tom finally muttered, his voice cracking with emotion. His usual confidence had vanished, replaced by a vulnerability he had long buried. "I've been so caught up in everything, I didn't realize how much I was hurting you." Sarah's eyes softened, the hurt she had felt moments earlier now mingling with compassion. "It's not just about what you say, Tom. It's about showing up. It's about making time, even when life gets in the way. I just wanted to feel like I mattered to you, like I was more than just someone you call when you need something." Tom nodded, his throat tight with emotion. The reality of what he had done weighed heavily on him, but there was no turning back. He had hurt her, and that pain couldn't be undone with a few words. He needed to show her that he was truly sorry, that he understood her feelings and was ready to make things right. "I'll do better, Mom. I promise. I'll be there for you, not just when it's convenient, but because you deserve it," Tom said, his voice firm with newfound resolve. It wasn't just an empty promise. It was the first step toward healing a bond that had been fractured by years of neglect and misunderstanding. As the two of them sat there in the quiet of the cafe, Sarah could feel the shift. It wasn't a magic moment, but it was a beginning of something that had been lost over the years. The veteran, still seated at his table, had quietly observed the entire exchange. He hadn't spoken a word since his intervention, but his eyes gleamed with a knowing pride. The veteran's role in all of this had been small but monumental. Sometimes it only took a stranger, a person from outside the immediate circle, to offer a perspective that others couldn't see. His words hadn't been harsh, but they had been powerful. And in that moment, he had given Tom a gift that no one else had been able to. The gift of seeing beyond his own ego and recognizing the importance of family. For Sarah, this small but meaningful shift in Tom's attitude was a victory. It wasn't about receiving an apology or hearing empty promises. It was about the realization that her son was beginning to understand the true value of love and respect. It was about knowing that, despite all the years of silence, there was still hope for them. As Sarah and Tom sat together, The awkwardness began to melt away. Tom's hand reached across the table and gently grasped his mother's. Sarah didn't pull away. Instead, she held his hand, the warmth of the gesture reaffirming the quiet understanding between them. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough for now. It was a moment of reconciliation, one that would last longer than the fleeting tension that had once defined their relationship. The veteran watched the scene quietly, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He knew that what he had done today wasn't just about changing the course of one conversation. It had changed the course of a relationship. And in that small, simple act, he had reminded everyone in that café of one crucial truth. Respect for others, especially those closest to us, is something we must never take for granted. The days that followed were a quiet reflection of the conversation that had unfolded in the café. Tom had taken his promise to heart, but the challenge now was putting it into action. He had been so caught up in his daily routine, so distracted by the pressures of his job and his own personal struggles, that he hadn't fully understood how much his mother needed him. Now he found himself waking up earlier, making time for phone calls, and showing up in ways that were different from before. It wasn't easy. The habits of neglect were deeply ingrained, and the guilt of having hurt his mother still weighed heavily on him. Every time he looked at her, he saw the years of missed opportunities, the countless moments where he could have been there for her but chose not to be. But the change was real, even if it was small. One afternoon, as he was sitting in his office, Tom found himself thinking back to the veteran's words. He hadn't realized it at the time, but they had struck him at the very core of his identity. He had been so focused on building his career and achieving success, yet had failed to recognize that true success came from nurturing the relationships that mattered most. That evening, Tom made a decision. He picked up the phone and called Sarah, his mother. He had been avoiding the more emotional conversations, unsure of what to say after everything that had happened. But he knew this call was important. "Hey, Mom," he said when she picked up. The sound of her voice, soft and warm, made him realize how much he had missed their connection. "Hi, Tom. How are you? I didn't hear from you this week." Sarah's voice was gentle, but there was a hint of concern beneath it. "I'm good. Just wanted to check in, see how you're doing." "I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about," he replied, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders as the words came out. He had finally said it, the thing that had been stuck in his throat for so long. "And, well, I just wanted to say I'm really sorry for not being there when you needed me. You were right. I've taken you for granted, and I want to change that." Sarah was silent for a moment, and Tom felt his stomach twist. Was she going to forgive him? Would she even believe him? Then softly she spoke. "Tom, I appreciate you saying that. I really do. But more than anything, I just want you to show me that things will be different. You don't have to be perfect, but just show up. Show me you care." That was it. Simple, yet profound. It wasn't about grand gestures or extravagant apologies. It was about the small, everyday actions that demonstrated love and respect. Tom knew this now. The realization hit him harder than any words could. Over the next few weeks, Tom made sure to be there more often. He started visiting Sarah every Sunday, bringing lunch or simply spending time with her. At first, their conversations were a little awkward as they both navigated this new phase of their relationship. But as time went on, the distance that had once existed between them slowly started to disappear. Sarah had always been the heart of their family, the one who held everything together. But Tom had never truly understood her role until now. He began to listen, really listen, to her stories, the stories she had shared countless times, but that he had dismissed in the past. And through these small conversations, he began to see her not just as his mother, but as a person in her own right. A woman with a past, with dreams, and with experiences that went beyond being his caretaker. One evening, as they sat on the porch sipping tea, Sarah smiled at him. "You've changed, Tom. I can see it. I'm proud of you." Her words meant more than anything he had heard in a long time. It wasn't just about her being proud of the work he had done or the person he had become. It was about her seeing that he was finally present, truly present, in her life. Tom realized then that the journey he had started was not just about mending a broken relationship. It was about becoming the person he always hoped to be, someone who valued the people around him more than he valued his own ambitions. And in that process, he had rediscovered the importance of family. But there was still one more thing that Tom needed to do, the thing that had been left unsaid for far too long. He needed to thank the veteran. Without the stranger's words, without the gentle nudge that had reminded him of what truly mattered, he wouldn't have had the courage to change. Tom knew where the veteran frequented, the same small café. The next day, he made his way there, feeling a mixture of nervousness and gratitude. He wanted to express his thanks, even if it was just a small gesture. When he walked in, he immediately spotted the veteran sitting at a corner table, reading the newspaper. "Excuse me, sir," Tom said, his voice steady but full of sincerity. "I just wanted to thank you for what you said that day. You changed my life. You gave me the push I needed to open my eyes." The veteran looked up from his paper, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "I didn't do much, son. You did the hard part. You made the choice to change. That's all anyone can ask." Tom smiled, feeling a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in years. "I won't forget what you said. Thank you." The veteran nodded, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Take care of your mother. She's a gift, not just to you, but to the world." As Tom walked out of the cafe, he realized something profound. Sometimes it's a stranger's words that can open our eyes to what really matters, and it's up to us to take the lessons we've learned and apply them in our own lives. And that's exactly what he intended to do. It had been 2 months since Tom had started making those small changes in his life. What had begun as an apology to his mother had blossomed into a new way of living, one grounded in intentionality and love. But as Tom looked at his mother now, he realized that his journey had just begun. It wasn't enough to simply show up once in a while or say the right words. The real work was in the consistency, in the ongoing effort to build a relationship that could withstand the test of time. One Friday evening, as they sat on the back porch sipping tea, Sarah turned to Tom with a soft smile. "I've been thinking," she began, "about how much we've changed in the past couple of months. It's like we're starting over, isn't it?" Tom nodded. "It feels like that, too. It's strange, though. I never thought I'd be the one to have to start over, but I'm glad I am." Sarah's smile deepened, and for the first time in a long time, Tom saw a flicker of hope in her eyes, a hope that had been buried under years of neglect, under the weight of his silence. She had been patient, waiting for him to come around, never pushing, but always quietly, hoping that he would see the importance of their relationship. Now he had finally understood. "I think," Sarah said, her voice steady, "that you've been holding on to guilt for a long time. But guilt doesn't change anything. Only your actions can." Her words hit Tom like a wave crashing on the shore. He had been carrying that guilt for years, feeling like he had failed his mother and failed himself. But now he saw things differently. The guilt wasn't helpful. It was only keeping him stuck in the past. It was time to move forward, to rebuild, not just with words, but with consistent actions. But there was something else that had been on Tom's mind lately, something he hadn't yet addressed. It was the veteran, the man who had unknowingly started this transformation. Tom couldn't help but wonder, how did someone like him find the strength to give a stranger a second chance? What had made him step in at that precise moment? The answer, as Tom would later learn, was rooted in the same values that the veteran had lived by his whole life: honor, respect, and a deep understanding of the human condition. That was what had made him intervene. It wasn't just about Tom's relationship with his mother. It was about the larger universal truth that we all need help sometimes. And it's the people who care enough to step in that make all the difference. Tom knew that he couldn't just walk away from this experience. He had been changed, and with that change came a responsibility. A responsibility to not just be a better son, but to be a better person overall. The following Sunday, Tom decided to visit his mother with something different, something that would symbolize his commitment to making their bond even stronger. He had spent the past week researching activities they could do together, something that would allow them to bond beyond their usual conversations. Tom had been surprised by how many experiences they had never shared before. They hadn't even taken a trip together in years. It was time for that to change. When he walked into her house, he held up a small travel brochure. "How do you feel about going on a little trip, Mom? Just you and me. We can take a weekend getaway, somewhere peaceful." Sarah blinked, surprised. "A trip? What about your work? You're so busy." "I've already cleared my schedule. I want us to have this time." "Just the two of us," Tom said, a genuine smile on his face. "We've missed out on too much." The idea of taking a trip together was more than just a vacation. It was a symbol of Tom's commitment to their relationship, a reminder that he was willing to prioritize their time together no matter what else was going on in his life. The next weekend, they boarded a small train bound for a quiet town near the mountains. It wasn't anything extravagant, but the simplicity of the moment felt like the world had slowed down. They spent the weekend walking through small villages, visiting local shops, and enjoying peaceful dinners together. There were no distractions, no phones, no obligations. Just the two of them, rediscovering the joy of each other's company. As the train ride back home came to an end, Sarah turned to Tom, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and love. "This was the best thing we've done in so long," she said softly. "Thank you for making this happen." Tom looked at his mother and realized how much he had taken her for granted. But in the quiet moments of their trip, he also realized something else. He had found a piece of himself that he had lost. In giving his mother his time and attention, he had not only repaired their relationship, but he had repaired something within himself, too. He was no longer the man who had taken his mother's presence for granted. He was now the son who understood the value of time, of showing up, and of prioritizing the ones who matter most. It was a lesson he would carry with him forever. And as the train pulled into the station, Tom felt the weight of the past few months settle in, a weight that no longer felt burdensome, but empowering. The journey had been long, but it had been worth every step. The sun had barely risen as Tom made his way down the hallway of his childhood home. He had come to a realization the night before, something that had been quietly brewing in the back of his mind. While he had made significant strides in mending his relationship with his mother, there was one more piece of the puzzle that had yet to fall into place. And it wasn't about his actions anymore. It was about how he was viewing himself. Tom had spent most of his life battling feelings of inadequacy, constantly trying to prove to the world and to himself that he was capable, that he was enough. But now, after months of growth and reflection, Tom understood something deeper. Self-worth didn't come from accomplishments or the approval of others. It came from accepting oneself, flaws and all. As he entered the kitchen, Sarah greeted him with a warm smile, her eyes crinkling at the corners. The last few months had seen her transform too. She was no longer the silent, passive figure she once was. With Tom's efforts to reconnect, she had also found a renewed sense of self. It was clear to Tom that they were both healing, together, but in different ways. "Good morning," Sarah said, setting a steaming mug of coffee on the table. "How did you sleep?" Tom took a seat and wrapped his hands around the warm mug. "Better than I have in a long time. I've been thinking, though, about how much we've both changed in such a short time." Sarah raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. "I guess what I'm realizing is that this isn't just about us. It's about me, too," he confessed, his voice soft but filled with conviction. "I've spent too long trying to earn my worth, trying to prove that I deserve good things. But I've come to see that I don't need to prove anything to anyone, not even myself." Sarah's eyes softened as she listened, a knowing look crossing her face. She had always been a witness to Tom's struggles, but now, hearing him say these words out loud, she could feel the weight lifting from both their shoulders. They had both been living under the assumption that love, respect, and connection had to be earned or deserved. But now they understood the truth. that these things were not rewards for good behavior. They were gifts, freely given and freely received, as long as they were nurtured. As Tom sat there, he realized that this understanding, this moment of clarity, was one of the most important realizations of his life. He was no longer the angry son who had neglected his mother for years. He was now the son who had learned to show up consistently, to be present, and to cherish every moment they had together. But this wasn't just about healing their past. It was about moving forward with a renewed sense of purpose, about creating something better for the future. Later that day, as they sat on the porch enjoying the breeze, Tom decided to bring up an idea that had been floating in his mind for a while. He had always been the type to keep things to himself, to think he could handle everything on his own. But now he understood the power of vulnerability, of asking for help when it was needed. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice a little hesitant. "Maybe we could do something together, something that would be meaningful for both of us." Sarah's curiosity piqued. "What do you have in mind? How about we start a project together? Something creative. I don't know exactly what yet, but maybe we can explore some of the things we've always wanted to do but never had the time for," Tom said. Sarah smiled, her eyes lighting up with a mix of excitement and hope. "That sounds wonderful. It's been a while since we did something like that, hasn't it?" The thought of working on something together filled Tom with a sense of joy he hadn't expected. It wasn't just about reconnecting. It was about building something new. They could create something together, something that represented the new chapter they were embarking on. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be worth it. As the weeks passed, Tom and Sarah began exploring different ideas. They thought about starting a small garden, learning a new craft, or even documenting their family history through a scrapbook. But as they explored, Tom realized that it wasn't the project that mattered most. It was the time spent together, the shared experience of collaborating, and the sense of purpose they both found in it. Through this process, Tom came to see something about his relationship with his mother that he hadn't fully understood before. It wasn't about fixing everything that had gone wrong in the past. It was about creating new memories, new foundations that would carry them forward. It was about continuing to show up, to put in the effort, and to be present in the small moments that, over time, would become the ones they remembered most. In a world that often made people feel like they were defined by their past mistakes or their ability to succeed, Tom learned that true happiness didn't come from proving your worth. It came from accepting yourself, loving others, and building meaningful connections. The healing process, he discovered, wasn't linear. It wasn't about a final destination. It was about the journey. And so, with a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper understanding of what really mattered, Tom and Sarah embarked on this new chapter of their lives together, hand in hand. The road ahead was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. They had each other, and that was all they needed. As the days passed, Tom and Sarah found themselves adjusting to their new normal. There was a subtle shift in the atmosphere between them, an unspoken understanding that had taken root in their hearts. They were no longer bound by the past, no longer weighed down by the hurt and resentment that had once defined their relationship. Every day felt like a new beginning, a chance to rediscover each other in a way they never thought possible. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Tom stood on the porch looking out at the horizon. He could feel the weight of the last few months lifting from his shoulders, and a sense of peace settled over him. It was as if everything he had been searching for was finally within his grasp. But this wasn't the end of his journey. It was only the beginning. "Mom, come outside," Tom called softly. Sarah stepped onto the porch, a smile on her face, and joined him by his side. Together they watched the sky change colors as the sun dipped below the horizon. It was a simple moment, but it felt monumental. "You know," Tom began, his voice thoughtful, "I never realized how much I needed moments like this. Simple, quiet, with you." Sarah placed a hand on his arm, her touch warm and reassuring. "Me neither. I've spent so much time focusing on everything that went wrong that I didn't see how much we had right here, right now. Tom smiled, grateful for the wisdom his mother had always possessed, even when he hadn't fully appreciated it. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, savoring the peace that surrounded them. Then Sarah spoke again, breaking the silence. "Tom, there's something I've been wanting to say to you." Tom turned to face her, his curiosity piqued. "What is it, Mom?" "I just want you to know how proud I am of you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Not for the things you've done, but for the person you've become. You've learned to show up for yourself and for me in ways I never expected. And that's more than enough. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You've already shown your strength." The weight of her words hit Tom hard. He had spent so much time in his life feeling like he had to prove himself, to others, to his mother, to the world. But now, with her words, he understood. He had already proven everything he needed to. He had shown up. He had done the hard work of healing, of rebuilding their relationship. And that was enough. Tom hugged his mother tightly, the bond between them stronger than it had ever been. The future was still uncertain, but in this moment, they were okay. They were enough. Weeks passed, and Tom and Sarah continued to grow in their relationship. They pursued new projects together, explored new interests, and created memories that would last a lifetime. But the most important lesson they both carried with them was one they would never forget: the power of acceptance, vulnerability, and unconditional love. As Tom reflected on everything that had happened, he realized that the most important thing he had learned was not just how to heal his relationship with his mother, but how to heal himself. He had spent so long trying to be someone he wasn't, trying to live up to the expectations of others. But in the process, he had forgotten the most important lesson: that true growth begins with self-acceptance. That evening, as they sat down for dinner, Tom looked across the table at his mother and smiled. He no longer felt the need to search for validation. He no longer felt the pressure to prove himself. He had found peace within himself, and that was all he had ever truly needed. And so Tom and Sarah's journey of healing continued, one step at a time. The road wasn't always easy, but it was theirs to walk together. It's a reminder that no matter where we start or how broken things may seem, we always have the power to rebuild, to heal, and to choose love. If you've ever found yourself in a similar situation, remember that healing isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, being vulnerable, and accepting yourself for who you are. The journey may not always be easy, but it's always worth it. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales of transformation and growth. And remember, you're not alone. Your journey can begin today.